All right. Good morning, everybody. And I have to tell you something. I want to start off by saying it is a beautiful sunny day in Southern California. And I'm not going to mess around. I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to play games. I have to tell you that the day has already come out being an insanely bad day for all intents and purposes. But it's a great day because the Lord is in control. He knows exactly what he's doing. And folks, let me tell you so. If you see me a little bit more lit up than I normally am, if you see me a little bit more lively, you'll know the reason why, because God is hard at work, and I have faith and trust and confidence in the fact that God knows exactly what he's doing. So, with that said, the one thing that I want to say is that we have a lot to go over today. We are going to talk about the enemies of Israel that are coming out full bore. And folks, I'm telling you this right now. I am sick and tired of the woke right naysayers. We are going to go through 10 minutes of a show where they completely bash Israel and say some of the most insane, unbiblical, and inconsistent things that you are going to hear in a very long time. But it is a great demonstration, an absolutely great demonstration of how the enemy works. I also want to say this. This will be a very, very, very important show, because we are talking about a mission-critical time in the Middle East right now, and things are happening behind the scenes that very few people are aware of because it involves a heightened spiritual warfare. It is a consequential warfare, and it is one that is playing out very real, especially in the Middle East. Lots of things are happening right now, folks, and we're going to talk about it. Also, I want to, in advance, ask for your forgiveness, because there are a lot of things that may fall through the cracks because I am alone today in the studio. That's okay. I think that you guys that are in the chat will be able to regulate each other. And if there are trolls going on, well, do your best. Be filled with the Spirit. We're going to work through this. But there is a lot going on today, so we're going to jump in it. Also, I want to say this because it is important for all of you guys doing the super stickers and the super chats. Thank you so much. Keep them coming. They are a blessing. I will read them at the end of the show when we do Q&A, and I can tell you this right now, the Q&A is going to be a bang-up Q&A. Okay, I'm telling you, it's going to be an interesting one, because I think when you get through material like this, there oftentimes are more questions than there are answers. So we're going to get into all of this because it is so incredibly important. There's a lot of good stuff to talk about. By the way, the other thing that I want to talk about, although I'm releasing a video in the next couple of days, is I am going to talk a little bit about the bombing in Yemen and what that actually means. And some of you might be listening to me and going, wait, James, the bombing in Yemen happened a couple of days ago. You're right. But the artifacts of that, the implications, where things are going geopolitically, what's happening spiritually, is just beginning. And we're going to talk about that because there is so much to say. Now, as we get into going over this show and me talking about this, because this is very, very important. When I play this video, you will hear some language. I want to warn you. Not much. You will hear a couple of bad words being thrown out. I will try to beep them when they come, but that's going to be very hard to do. I am a one-man show today, nothing wrong with that. But I'm going to do my best to make sure that all of this gets looked at thoroughly. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is I want to lay a foundation down for this because this is super, super important. Okay? Super, super important. I support Israel because God does. Let me make myself clear. Let me say it again. I support Israel because God does. Make no mistake, his covenant with Abraham is called everlasting. We read about this in Genesis 17, verses 7 through 8. We read about it actually everywhere. But it might not be a bad idea to pull out my old-fashioned, old-school Bible and just read it. Every now and then, I just like holding pages, right? Instead of, flipping through and typing in keys and so on and so forth. By the way, John and Roger, thank you so much for this Bible. It's a blessing. But I want to read this to you because these words are so important. And today, actually, I'm reading out of the New King James, which is fine. It's a more modern English translation, even though the core of it is still the same. But let me read this to you. Oh, I hate it when pages stick together. All right, there we go. Let me read this to you. This is Genesis chapter 17. This is a reiteration of other promises that have been told. But I'm going to read this to you right now. It says this. Verse 7, and I will establish my covenant between me and you. And notice this, your descendants after you in their generations. Notice this, for an everlasting covenant to be God to you and to your descendants after you. Also, I give to you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan. Notice this, as an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. This does not qualify Israel as long as it's not led by Bibi Netanyahu. This does not qualify Israel so long as they fall into what the world thinks they should fall into. This does not qualify Israel so long as they don't defend themselves from the animalistic savages that we know as Hamas, as they would say in their own language, in Gaza. It's ridiculous. This is a promise that is made without condition. This is a promise that has nothing tied to it, no conditions tied to it. It is an everlasting promise. Now, I want to point something out because this is really important. When I tell my children, in essence, I, more than most people, made a covenant with them. I said, I will adopt you as my own. All my children are adopted. Very precious babies. I made a covenant with them. I did it in front of God. I did it in front of man. I signed all the paperwork, went through all the things that I had to do. I did absolutely everything that was necessary to bring those precious babies into my life. Here's the funny fact about my 7-year-old, my 4-year-old, and my soon-to-be 3-year-old. Such. None of that is ever going to change. My family has created amongst itself an everlasting covenant modeled after what God says concerning the family that we have together. If my children misbehave, if my children act ungodly, if my children choose to do wicked, if my children choose to forsake the instruction that was given to them, that was once provided for me by Almighty God, I will never forsake the identity and the covenant and the relationship that was established between me and my children. My son will always be my son. My daughters will always be my daughters. When my wife gets emotional, she'll always be my wife. When I get emotional, I hope to pray I'll always be your husband. The promise that God made to his people was never predicated upon a functional condition that they have to achieve in order to produce an outcome. God said, you will be my children. I will be your God. I will give you this land, and the land will always be yours. God even went as far as to say, and this is important, we got to understand this. God went as far as to say that land would never be blessed unless the Jews were in it doing the work that they're doing. Whether or not anybody wants to admit that, that's the case. Perhaps the most significant and consequential aspect of the relationship that I have with my children is the fact that although there are great benefits to us being a family and to them having me as their father and me having them as my children, there are also some things that are going to be very difficult. Like, for example, my children will always be disciplined at a much different level than any other children are disciplined. We have never spared an opportunity to raise our children in God's ways and to teach them lessons. Why? Because they're my children, and I'm responsible for them. And even when they rebel against me, they will have consequences that are incurred upon them, that are consistent, regular, and in some cases, actually in many cases, produce significant change. Just because Israel is rebelling against God and God is disciplining Israel, it does not mean that the contract that he made with them is null and void. This is an important thing for me to bring about to you. Why? Because the premise of this whole conversation is to deal with the functional indoctrination that's taking place in the world right now, which, by the way, is very spiritual. It's uniquely spiritual. But the purpose of what I'm doing today is to address these things at perhaps the most significant and consequential level that we can. Now, I want to make myself clear. I'm going to use biblical precedent for the conclusions that I use or that I come to. There will be some things that are going to involve geopolitical analysis. There are going to be some things that are going to involve a whole lot of other things. But the one thing that I want to say is that all of this is fundamentally predicated upon what God's word says. If these matters are not understood, then you will never be aware of how serious things are getting. So what I hope to do today is show you what's being communicated here, what's being said, and then to deal with it, to literally repudiate it, because so much of what people are saying right now, completely, the things that people are saying is just ridiculous. So not only will I tackle it through Scripture, not only will I deal with it very specifically, as the young kids are saying now, I'm also going to provide for you the receipts. Okay? We're going to talk about this because this is super, super, super important to understand. But the level of ignorance that exists sometimes amongst people who are primarily uneducated regarding these issues and make statements based on some kind of a psychological bent is just broken. I also want to say this because it's really important. Many of the people that you are going to see in this video are people that have made remarkable contributions to our country in standing up for many issues that are right. We're not talking about evil people here. We're not talking about wicked or satanically inspired people, although the devil is having his way. The devil can use godly people too sometimes, okay? When things are not being paid attention to. So I want everybody to see this because I am not seeking to attack these people by any stretch of the imagination. That is not my heart. As a matter of fact, this section of this show comes from Timcast IRL. Some of you might be familiar with who Tim is. I think he's a wonderful man. I don't think he's a believer, but I do appreciate the many contributions that he has made throughout the years to wanting to propagate truth. I don't know what happened to the people on his show when this happened. I just don't get it. So what I will be attacking here is not the people. I will be attacking the arguments. I will be attacking the statements that are being made because they need to be attacked. They need to be dealt with. So let's talk about this. And I'm going to say the first 35 seconds of this, in my opinion, are what I would call historically reductive. In other words, they are taking history and they are reducing it down to something that it actually isn't. You can't make non-nuanced, blatant statements about something that's happening without being able to functionally discern what is happening strategically, especially when it comes to something as complex as Middle Eastern geopolitics. As it is, it's a pretty complex issue to deal with. As it is, it's a pretty remarkable problem to be facing. But that's what we're dealing. So we need to point this out. This is critical. And this one, right off the bat, comes out of the book of Candace Owens. I think it is hugely reductive. Hugely. And we're going to get into this right now because I have so much to say, especially when they start talking about things like dispensationalism. Because I am a dispensationalist. And his representation of what is functionally dispensational, or relationally for that matter, is completely broken. He does not understand our position. If he understood our position, you would probably be seeing something a little bit different coming out of his mouth. But to actually say that U.S. policy is being influenced by dispensational theologians is a completely obscene way of looking at things. By the way, I want to just say this right now. If U.S. policy was actually influenced heavily or primarily by solid dispensational Bible teachers, I'm going to tell you this right now, we would be in a much better, we'd be in way better shape in this country. We'd be more wealthy. We wouldn't have, boys trying to hang out with girls in bathrooms. We wouldn't have any of that stuff. So don't try to minimize this as some theocracy seeking to bring this away. We've got to understand this. So let's pay attention to what he says here. We're going to go over the first 30 seconds, and then I'm going to tackle this thing because it deserves to be tackled. And by the way, we have to talk about it. We cannot ignore this. Let's talk about this. This is very, very important. Let's listen to the first 35 seconds, and I'm probably going to stop him in the middle of that. Here we go.
We're talking about like dispensationalism, right? And I think it's fair to say that dispensationalism, which is a sort of modern view, a modern way to view the Bible, has completely guided our.
By the way, I want to make myself very, very clear. He defines dispensationalism. He says dispensationalism is a modern way to view the Bible. He is wrong. He is wrong on every level. As a matter of fact, the principles of dispensationalism were taught as early as the book of Genesis. We see it all throughout the scriptures, even in biblical poetry, even in the book of Ecclesiastes. When you talk about there's a time for this, there's a time for that, there's a time here, there's a time there, we see it. We would not see terms like the times of the Gentiles. We would not hear Jesus saying, my time is not yet come. You would never hear or refer to any form of functional compartmentalization of specific biblical periods by Jesus if dispensationalism was a modern view or a modern approach to biblical theology. Now, I'm doing my very best to not get into Bible college professor mode, but I just want to simply say that the idea that is being communicated here, that dispensationalism is some sort of a modern take, somehow, some sort of a modern take, is completely bogus. Dispensationalism at its core stands as a functional repudiation to modern day theological thinking for a lot of reasons. That's why what he's about to say, in my opinion, is historically reductive. So before he even goes on to talk about dispensationalism and what it's doing and what it means here, I just wanted to simply say that his characterization of what dispensationalism is completely wrong. It's completely wrong. It's broken. So I rebounded it just a little bit to give you some context. And we're going to go through this. And folks, I'm just warning you right now, okay? I just want you to know, I'm coming in hot. I am thoroughly bothered by what I'm hearing. It's absolutely ridiculous. This is very, very important. By the way, I guess I would want to ask this question. What do you define as modern? That'd be the other thing I'd want to ask. Like if I were sitting with him, I'd say, oh, what is modern to you? Is modern post 20 AD? Is modern 50 or 60 AD when the Apostle Paul is writing some of these letters? Because the Apostle Paul was uniquely dispensational. He was given the functional understanding of dispensationalism as taught in the Old Testament by many of the rabbis that he learned from. So even if your assertion that dispensationalism is a modern day teaching, which he actually says, he says it's the last 60, 70 years, then you would also be wrong, because functional dispensationalism, as I would call it, you see from the very account of creation. What do you think God would say? He created the heavens and the earth. Go out of his way to tell us how he did it. Explain every single day in which he did it, including the day of rest. And then throughout the scripture, we see references to the importance of the day of rest as being a symbol of the covenant, the Abrahamic covenant, to his people for the land of Israel. It was based on a functional dispensationalism. Modern day approach is obscene. God bless these people. I do think they do a wonderful thing. But if you're going to get out of your lane, which is okay, no problem, get out of your lane. I'm all for people getting out of their lanes. At least research it a little bit. Then make the intelligent argument. Now, if you were to tell me, oh man, my perception of dispensationalism may be a little skewed because I don't know everything, and my perception and awareness of government is limited because I'm not the governors who get to see all the inside stuff, but I'm thinking maybe it's beginning to look like this influence is carrying over, then you might be in a different world. I don't know. But that's not what's happening here. We're looking at something that is completely different, on a completely different level. Because that's what God's all about, folks. That's exactly what the Lord does. Watch this. This is very, very important. Watch.
Modern way to view the Bible has completely guided our foreign policy over the last 70, 80 years. And now you are seeing pushback from Christians, specifically Catholics and Reformed Protestants, against sort of this dispensational view of the Bible. And I think that's why you're seeing sort of a shift of Christians not supporting Israel on theological grounds anymore.
I honestly, I don't even know what to even begin to say. First of all, he calls himself Reformed. Okay, I get it. You know my grandfather who was in Egypt, a pastor in Egypt for 65 years? He was a Presbyterian pastor. That's Reformed, folks. There's a lot of Reformed people who have a dispensational view of end times and are not amillennialists like a lot of people in the Reformed theology are. So thank you for speaking for all of the Reformed community. I'm so grateful for that. I'm sure John MacArthur would love to support that statement coming out of the grave. But let's deal with the theological issue in just 1 minute. How about we just simply deal with the falsehood that says that Israel has been influenced, or Israel has been the influencing variable for everything. As I said before, this is historically reductive. Let me make myself clear here, folks. U.S. policy towards Israel arose from very strategic, humanitarian, and political factors. Mark that down. Take those notes. Humanitarian, political, and strategic variables. Should we talk about some of those strategic variables? The Holocaust aftermath. The alignment of the Cold War. Anybody think about that? How about shared democratic values? In that the only viable democracy, which by the way, when I say viable democracy in Israel, it's a very complicated one because most people don't understand how Israeli politics work. And you might be slick in saying, well, it's a parliament and there's this and that. It's a very complex infrastructure. Very complex infrastructure. So when I say it came from a humanitarian, strategic, and political factor, think about those things. Democratic values, Cold War alignment. Did I mention the Holocaust? How about regional security? How about the fact that Israel lives in the worst neighborhood that anybody could ever live in? That every single nation that surrounds them has tried in the past or has spoken very aggressive rhetoric about the elimination of not only the Jewish state, but all Jews. You think this thing with Hamas just happened because they were freedom fighters fighting for their rights to do something? No. Give me a break. These are people that say min shahibah. These are people that are talking about the whole idea min mahribah. These are the people that are talking about the idea of eliminating every single Jewish life. They don't want a two-state solution, folks. They want one state. That's what they want. And I'm being generous, by the way. I'm being very generous when I say that this is a historically reductive view. I'm being very generous. How about congressional and public opinion? Arms cooperation. How about Iranian deterrence? That's a big one. Now, you might talk about the argument of Iranian deterrence, and you might say, well, that's a pretty consequential argument, James, because we created the problem in Iran. Maybe we did. Maybe we did with the whole situation with the Shah. Maybe. It's very possible. Our intelligence organizations have done some very, very bad things all over the world. I get that. And I know, and I'm not trying to make excuse for the behavior of the United States of America, but what I am trying to say is that it is at best, and I'm being very generous when I say this, it is at best historically reductive. Give me a break. There is no single theology on the face of the earth that completely guided U.S. policy. I would make that statement so far as to talk about what our founding fathers did in they were guided by the Bible. They were guided by the Holy Spirit. But there was no single theology that guided them in that conclusion, even in the early days. And yes, contrary to popular belief, there was lots of dispensational thinking at the time of the founding of this nation. I'm not making the argument that our founding fathers were dispensationalists and thought the church was going to get raptured right away. But what I am saying is that there was a very common and well-accepted, understood view concerning what the Bible says in the last days that perfectly lined up with much of what I teach on a day-to-day basis. I think it's hilarious how some people will go on making these types of statements without understanding the conclusions that can be come to. It's ridiculous. By the way, if you don't believe me and you want the receipts, go to the Council on Foreign Relations. Take a look at the CFR overview of U.S. policy drivers. They actually talk about it. They say, these are the things that drive our policy. They talk about diplomacy. They talk about security. They talk about domestic politics. They talk about what's best for the United States of America. By the way, the CFR overview, the Council for Foreign Relations, that thing was completely rewritten, which is awesome. I think by the State Department, or at least with the influence of the State Department, because there's a lot of stuff that they put there that's pretty awesome. How about you take a look at Congress's summary of the discussion, and I have to have it come to my head. I believe it's the MOU for the Security Alliance in the long term, and what the long-term aid framework looks like. It's a memorandum of understanding dated, I believe, in 2016. You can find it on congress.gov. It talks about it. Guys, you could go to Oxford, to the Oxford Research Encyclopedia, and it would give you Cold War strategic alignment functions that directly repudiate the claim that this guy just made. By the way, I think it's sort of hilarious to talk about the fact that, all Catholics and Orthodox don't align with modern Zionism. He's about to say that right now. I believe that's what's coming next. Been a minute since I've seen this. My sister sent this video to me yesterday, and I just lost my mind. I watched it again and again and again. I'm like, this is not good for my mental health. But listen to what he says here. It's hilarious, actually.
Sure. There's two different ways to support Israel. You can support the people of Israel, which I believe are the ones that fall under the Abrahamic covenant, which is the Jews, the people of the Jewish faith, right?
Abraham did not specify, or God did not specify to God, the people of the Jewish faith. He said, your seed, your descendants. That's what he said. That's what he said. So it's completely ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Secular Jews, not this nation state of Israel. That's more where I come from my arguments on it. But you talk about dispensationalism and how the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church don't really align with the modern Zionism, and I think that you would be right. It's not as big of a percentage as I think a lot of people are inflating it to be. But the Second Vatican Council Declaration, Nostra Aetate, affirms God's covenant with the Jewish people has never been revoked. An official Catholic teaching holds the Old Covenant retains its value, and that the Jewish people remain most dear to God. So modern Catholic documents reaffirm that the abrogationist supersessionism, the view that Christianity has replaced Judaism entirely, lacks foundational Catholic doctrine.
Well, it's not
okay. Let me just say this. Anytime you see a guy, I'm going to rewind this to just show this to you. Not that I want to put the guy down. I understand what he's trying to do, and he gets my respect. These are good people, folks, okay? I'm not calling them bad people. But look at what he's doing when he starts talking about what did he call it? The Vatican II rulings, discussions. Look what he does. Let me play this for you.
Jewish people remain most dear to God.
You see that? He's reading. But there's a reason why I'm going to point this out, because he is stating something that's true.
Modern Catholic documents reaffirm that the abrogationist supersessionism, the view that Christianity has replaced Judaism entirely, lacks foundational Catholic doctrine.
Well, it's not a replacement, but
okay. So I want to go back here because this is important, and it is good to note this. It is because the Vatican, in that Vatican II, that Second Vatican. I forgot what he had named it. I looked it up. My brain is just fried right now. I'm a little distracted. It explicitly rejects anti-Jewish theology. It affirms that the Jews remain most dear to God and that the gifts and calling are irrevocable. They're quoting Romans chapter 11, verse 29. We're going to get into that in just a second. By the way, I want to point myself out. That is not a political endorsement of any policy. Okay? And by the way, during that period, it completely undercuts the idea of replacement theology, which is what is becoming more prominent right now through these lies. It recognizes the ongoing significance of Israel and the Jewish people. You would think, my goodness, that would actually come out of the Vatican? It did at one point. It did. Let me read to you Romans, because this is such an important passage. I want to go over this, because one of the problems that we've had in Calvary chapels in the past is we have men that are in ministry who fail morally, cheat on their wives. They do things to disqualify themselves from the honor that they have of being able to stand in the pulpit and do the work that they do in the ministry. And you can disqualify yourself. I do believe that people can disqualify themselves from the work of the ministry. I do believe that that happens. I truly believe that. So I'll argue this with some of these guys in ministry, and you know what they'll tell me every single time? They'll say, well, James, look at Romans 11:29. The gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. That's not the context. The context of Romans chapter 11 has nothing to do with a man who chooses to walk in rebellion and disobedience to God. The context of Romans chapter 11 is the clear stipulation that God will not forsake his people. And just because you Gentiles have been grafted in, which is the greatest honor and privilege that anybody could ever think about, just because you Gentiles have been grafted in, it does not mean that you have the right to arrogantly assume that God is done with Israel. On the contrary, God is just beginning with Israel. God is just working with Israel. Look at the context of this, because this is so important. He says the deliverer. Matter of fact, let me go back a few verses, because this is an important context to establish. Let's go to verse 26 or verse 25. For I do not desire, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own opinion, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of Gentiles has come in. This is the Apostle Paul saying that Israel will be blind concerning the Messiah until we're raptured. Until the fullness of the Gentiles, until the very last Gentile comes to know the Lord in this dispensation. Oh, wait, is that dispensationalism? Yes. Notice what he says. And so all Israel will be saved, as it is written, the deliverer will come out of Zion, and he will turn away ungodliness from Jacob, for this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. Uh-oh. Does that mean that there's a time coming where there will be many, many more Jews that will die? Just like we will? Yes. Does that mean there's a time coming that once they open up their eyes and become aware that they missed out on the first coming of Christ, that they get to commit to him before the second coming? Uh-oh. That's not what people like Candace Owens want to read. It's not what they want to hear. For this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. Why? Look at this. Look at what he says. Concerning the gospel, they are enemies for your sake. In other words, the fact that they have rebelled against the gospel has become something that you have become the great beneficiary of. This has happened for your sake. But concerning the election, they are beloved for the sake of the fathers. In other words, even though they've rebelled against God, they are still beloved by God, and they still are going to be dealt with by God as his own children for the sake of what? The promise that he made to those fathers. That's what he's talking about when he says for the sake of the fathers. Why does he say that? This is why. Here's the reason. For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. Oh my goodness. What does he mean when he says the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable? The gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. It means that God will not revoke the calling that he gave to Israel, nor will he revoke the gift that he gave to Israel. It'll never happen. God has said that on many occasions. Said in the Old Testament, all over the Old Testament. We're now hearing it in the New Testament. That's very, very important that you understand that. So God's not done with Israel. And then what does he go on to say? He says, for as you were once disobedient to God, yet now have obtained mercy through their disobedience, through the disobedience of the Jews, even so, these also have now been disobedient, that through the mercy shown you, they may also obtain mercy. For God has committed them all to disobedience, that he might what? Have mercy on them all. Oh my goodness. God has allowed them to walk away and be rebellious, so that one day they may become the beneficiary of the very promises that were made to their forefathers. So I appreciate these guys trying to say something meaningful while they're reading through what they may have pulled up on some finding with some counsel. Fine, I get it. But let's just be real with one another and at least explain significantly and consequentially why this means something. By the way, there is a Vatican document dated 2015. This is 2015. 2015. The title of the document is The Gifts and the Calling of God Are Irrevocable. That's the title. Funny, isn't that how that works? I just, it's hilarious to me that even with an anti-Israel, somewhat anti-God Pope, the one who just passed away, how there were still people in the Catholic Church that were at least acknowledging the reality of the Word of God. Let's go over the next section here. This one is just like, this one drives me absolutely crazy. This just thoroughly floors me here. Okay? And this is so critical. So absolutely critical. Watch this.
I mean, I'm a Reformed Protestant, but the Catechism of the Catholic Church does hold the view that, like in the Pauline letters, like in Galatians, where the promises made to Abraham were fulfilled in Christ. That's the...
They don't believe how toxic this is.
Sorry, commercials.
If you're still...
Let me just mute this commercial and move it on. Okay, let's try it again.
So,
And the argument that I would make, which is the, I guess you could call it the dispensationalist argument,
where the promises made to Abraham were fulfilled in Christ. That's the new covenant. And so,
and the argument that I would make, which is the, I guess you could call it the dispensationalist argument. It's not really, but you know what I'm saying, is under the Abrahamic covenant, it's an everlasting covenant, right? So, and if God is omnipotent, doesn't make mistakes, then he can't create an everlasting covenant that would have an end date. Right. So, and it wouldn't transfer, because if it would transfer, then they wouldn't have to create the new covenant. It would just be the same covenant.
Well, it is the same covenant. It's the overarching covenant of grace.
But why would it be called the new covenant?
Because it's still the same covenant between God and his people.
But new would mean different.
Well, new as in the old one has been fulfilled.
No,
that's the old promises made to Abraham.
We go right back to that. If the Abrahamic covenant is an everlasting covenant, it can't be fulfilled. It's everlasting.
So we have to define what the covenant is, and the covenant would be the definitive means.
By the way, let me just say this: any covenant being fulfilled is fulfilled by virtue of its very existence being adhered to. So for example, if I enter into a sales contract for the purchase of my vehicle and I've chosen to finance my vehicle, I am fulfilling the covenantal obligation. That is a legal term, by the way. For the consideration promised to me And so long as I am paying the money on a regular basis, the fulfillment of that covenantal promise, stipulation, whatever you might want to call it, is continuing on. So the idea that they are arguing back and forth as into what's fulfilled and what isn't fulfilled is kind of obscene in many ways. Okay? So this is where it becomes such a ridiculous line of thinking. By the way, the functional repudiation of all of these conclusions are all foundationally based on the fact that most of the statements that these people are making are based on a thorough misunderstanding of what the Bible actually says. So let's read some of these passages. Well, we'll do that in just a second. Let me back up, because this part is kind of important, and I don't want to ignore it. I think it's critical to talk about, okay? Because you have to backtrack a little bit. Because there are multiple biblical truths that live with one another and they don't contradict themselves. God promises everlasting land, and he promises an everlasting covenant to Abraham's seed. We just read Genesis chapter 17, verses 7 through 8. How about this? How about we go to a completely different area of the Bible? How about we read biblical poetry for just a second? By the way, the promises of God being reiterated in biblical poetry happen so much more than you think. Why? Because in the psalmist's expression of gratitude for God and what he's done for him and his people, doesn't matter what psalmist it is, you know what they oftentimes do? They oftentimes rehearse the promises of God as they've been taught, through understanding and knowing and reading the scriptures. I love the sound of turning pages. That's where the electronic thing, that's where you just lose it with the electronic thing. But let me read this to you. I'm going to read you 3 verses. Actually, it's technically 4 verses. Psalm 104, or 105, I'm sorry. Psalm 105. And I'm going to start in verse 8. Let me read this to you. It says, he remembers, this is God speaking. Matter of fact, let me just start in verse 7 so we can establish context. He is the Lord our God. His judgments are in all the earth. He remembers his covenant forever. Let me read that again. He remembers his covenant forever. The word which he commanded for 1,000 generations. How about we just take it literal for a second? Are we at 1,000 generations yet? Not even close. We're not even close. Not happening. Let's continue on. The covenant which he made with Abraham and his oath to Isaac, and confirmed it to Jacob for a statute, to Israel as what? An everlasting covenant. If you're confused about what that covenant is, look what he says. Verse 11, saying, to you I will give the land of Canaan as an allotment of what? Your inheritance. The allotment of your inheritance. We've already been told, going through Romans, the gifts and the calling of God are without repentance. They're irrevocable. That's what it says. We simply are the recipients of the spiritual blessing that comes from it. That's what it tells us. Write it down if you have to. It's important. Genesis chapter 17, verses 7 through 8. Write that down. Write down Psalm 105, 8 through 11. Write down Romans, all of Romans chapter 11, the first couple of verses of Romans. Romans chapter 11 and chapter 12. Read verse 11 and verse 12 of Romans chapter 11. Read Galatians, which, by the way, Galatians is hilarious to me, because people use Galatians as a tool, especially Galatians chapter 3. They use it as a tool to argue that Israel is no longer valid. Not true. Completely not true. Bogus. Completely bogus. Just amazing. Now they're going to go on about McDonald's for a little while. And, there's a McDonald's in Gaza or whatever. I think they're joking around, so I'm not even going to address that because it's not really substantive in my opinion. But let me go over here for a second. Okay, because this is another place that's important. And I think it's like really critical. Oh, by the way, they make a joke about like rooftop party in Gaza and all that kind of stuff. Okay. I do want, what, I'm going to play this. I'm going to just point out one very important thing because I do think it is an important thing to say because it does speak to what we're seeing right now in Gaza and what we've actually seen. So let me just play this portion here.
$1,000 on a rooftop party in Gaza, and that's on video.
There's a roof in Gaza?
Yeah, there's one left.
Wow.
There's one left, and if you went over there and you
they would throw me off, wouldn't
they? They would literally fucking kill you. Yeah, they would throw you off.
I know. The IDF would.
You do have to admit that argument, though, Rathbone.
Sorry about the language, by the way. I feel very sad. By the way, I do want to point this out. The guy that you're seeing right here, he's become a real disappointment to me. Because he is brutally anti-Israel. Very, very anti-Israel. It's just crazy. It's just, by the way, nuts. Which, by the way, going back on their jokes and all that, I'm not even going to play it, but we'll leave it be. But the whole thing of rooftops, getting thrown off of rooftops, I do want to make this statement because I think it's important. That's what they did. Like, do you know that when Gaza was given up to the Palestinians, it was under the control of the Palestinian Authority? Do you guys know that? It was under the control of the Palestinian Authority. Did you also know that Hamas actually threw the Palestinian Authority leaders off roofs and took their lives? Do you know that there are more Palestinians that were killed by Hamas than there ever would have been Israel? A lot of people don't want to hear that, but it's true. It's absolutely true. It's ridiculous. And by the way, the fact that they're saying that Israel isn't going to be as forgiving to gay marriage or any of that kind of stuff, folks, let me tell you something. Although I'm not definitely proud of how Israel has embraced so much of the nonsense that we're actually embracing, hopefully we're shunning because it's destroying our society. Okay, that kind of stuff happens all the time. All the time. By the way, I don't know if you even know this, but in 2006, Israel recognized, for legal purposes, foreign same-sex marriages. So what are you going to have? Oh, they're hatred people, they're full of hate, or they're ungodly because of what they're doing, and that's why they don't have the covenant. Think about that for just a second. Okay, let's start this next section. This one is, to me, it's just unbelievable. But you know what you're going to hear? You're going to hear the Candace Owens typical rhetoric. That is literally a bunch of nonsense. Okay? Just a bunch of nonsense. But let's take a listen.
Does kind of create,
sure. But I also don't think that Israel is sympathetic to gays necessarily because gay marriage is outlawed.
Yeah, you are right about that. Yeah. But it's just they are more friendly to gays. So you.
By the way, let me just say this one more time. Gay marriage is not outlawed in Israel. As a matter of fact, gay marriage or the allotment of gay marriage became law of the land. I looked it up in Israel in 2006. 2006. It was a legal practice in Israel, officially put in the books. So don't do that. Don't lie. And stop trying to create these moral equals. It's just ridiculous. But take a listen. This guy is probably the biggest shocker to me. Because although he's good at trolling and that's what he does, he loves trolling, this guy genuinely hates Israel. And it's very obvious that he does. It breaks my heart, actually, because I think he's done a lot of good, even with the comedy that he does. I think he's done a lot of good. But here we go.
Argument from the left where it's hey, if you're pro-LGBTQ, then why would you be pro-Palestine? I'm just saying that is a tough argument, because you're like, because I debate both sides. We're having a debate.
to me, it's not a good argument because you're trying to run cover for the IDF bombing indiscriminately.
Did you know there's a way to drink ice cold?
Ugh, I hate these commercials. Sorry, guys. Let me pass through the commercial here. So, the idea that they're bombing indiscriminately is just so obscene. Let him finish his rhetoric, and we'll talk about that.
Indiscriminately, right? What do you mean by that?
I mean
like
that they
blowing up hospitals on TV.
Well, indiscriminately.
I mean, look at the.
Would mean wherever. Yeah, we
right here. This all
Well,
the.
they admit though, Misfit, that they make mistakes, and sometimes it was a mistake we bombed that Catholic church. It was a mistake that we bombed the hospital.
Is not a. Is still
But
criminal.
I don't think they're making mistakes. I think that they're very talented and know what the hell they're doing.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you can make that
Language
argument
here.
that
Sorry.
there's mistakes that happen in war, and I think that would be a valid argument.
If this was a war.
I think that you should call them out when they do something wrong, and I think that you.
So did you notice the fact that they're not even calling this a war? Did you notice that? You know how they talk about the indiscriminate bombing? That the IDF is indiscriminately bombing hospitals. That's what they said. Well, let's talk about the most notorious hospital blast, shall we? El Ahli, October the 17th, 2023. Do you know that there are independent investigators, including Arab investigators, some of which were Egyptians, including the Human Rights Watch? Yes, folks, that said the misfired rocket launch was not the IDF, it was Gaza. It was a misfired rocket launch. By the way, I should have thought about this before the show. But I could play for you and translate in Arabic them talking about this. And then even being happy. Because Israel will undoubtedly be blamed for these actions. I think the thing with the churches is ridiculous. Now, there are a few of these tragic cases. He's talking about the Greek Orthodox Church that was around that same time. I want to say like October 19th. It was a few days from the time that the hospital blast took place. The IDF said and made it very clear, and they were right, that it targeted a Hamas command site nearby. The church compound, was unintentionally damaged, causing civilian death. But the problem is this. This is the crazy. This is the crazy part. Even Reuters, what's wrong with me? Even Reuters, PBS, the AP, a bunch of these people, all of them reported that the church was not the target. They also reported that the IDF publicly expressed regret regarding that. So I bring this up because, yes, was it the result of an attack by the IDF in defense of Israel? Absolutely. But everybody knows that it was done in a way that drew that fire that they had to bring. And so the casualty that came as a result of it was because of the actions of Hamas, not the IDF. By the way, let me make myself clear. If the IDF is publicly expressing regret about the casualties that come secondarily from this attack, that would not be reflective of a policy of indiscriminate action. No way is it reflective of that. It does not mean that the IDF indiscriminately attacks religious sites. The statement that he is making, by the way, is irresponsible. Irresponsible. By the way, for those of you that want a little bit of clarity with respect to the legal terminology, because this is very, very important, and I think it's like really, really remarkable to understand this. When we want to establish legal clarity for terms like indiscriminate, okay? Indiscriminate, if you look it up in terms of what we would call the laws of war, which they do exist. You even see this pop up in Geneva, all this stuff. Indiscriminate is a law of war term that means not directed at a specific military objective. Okay? That is not what happened here. Even the people that hate Israel will at least admit that. The presence of tragic errors, what I would call terribly tragic errors, does not itself prove indiscriminate action. There is nothing indiscriminate about what's being described here. It requires a very simple case-by-case analysis as defined by the law of things like what was the target? What were the precautions that were taken? What about proportionality? Because that is a question that gets asked oftentimes. And if you think about it, Hamas embedding assets in civilian areas creates huge complicities with the actions of Hamas in this instead of the actions of the IDF. You can't correctly analyze things like target, precautions, proportionality, all those things that I talked about if you don't deal with the issue of complicit action by Hamas. They are embedding targets, military targets in civilian areas. We need to spend more time talking about this stuff, guys. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. Now listen to this, because again, what you're about to hear over the next 30 seconds is yet again another reflection of ignorance. It's not being aware of the facts. And simple research will bring this stuff out. Simple research will clearly speak to this issue. And it doesn't take much. Listen, folks, these facts that I'm sharing with you are all stipulated to. The problem is so many people don't believe them because they're not widely reported. They're not fairly discussed. That's the bigger problem that's in front of us right now. And it is deeply consequential on a lot of levels. So listen to what he says here. And again, this is, it's ridiculous. But take a listen. It all means something. It all speaks to something. Listen to this.
No, you don't.
Well, Brethren, you made a good point. Is this a war? Because if it's an asymmetrical power struggle where one person has all the bombs and the other people have no food.
Remember the term asymmetrical power struggle for just a second. Just remember it. Because he's using purposefully, intentionally calculated, manipulative terms. Terms that he probably doesn't understand and terms that he's been taught by whoever brainwashed him. Because if you were to define this consequentially, if you were to define this definitively, what he is terming here as asymmetrical action is something he knows no idea what he's talking about. And by the way, just so you know, even the International Committee of the Red Cross would disagree with his assertion, with his assessment. Let's continue on because this is very important. Folks, this is what ignorance sounds like right here. This is what ignorance sounds like. I could take a parakeet. I think they're parakeets. No. What are they called? The talking birds. And make them talk clearer than this. Watch this.
It's just a war, right? I mean, Doesn't a war have to be a little more 50-50, 60-40 if it's 99 versus 1%?
Again,
well, are you saying that if a weaker enemy commits that act that was happening?
Well, it's like you're saying how they're not even a country. Well, then in that case, they're not even an enemy, and then they shouldn't even be fighting.
Well,
them,
one could make the argument that it is a civil war.
Well,
so I guess that his assertion here might be that we were unjust as the United States of America defending our interests after 9/11 because it wasn't technically a nation. It was just a group of people. Folks, let me make myself clear. Because this is ignorance. This is brutal ignorance. We can argue this from a moral level, but how about we just speak about it definitively? How about we just make the argument with definition according to legal terms and generally accepted terms as is founded by generally accepted practice, precedent, by the community that has actually established doctrine for how wars should be ran. Armed conflict, that's war. Armed conflict, that's war. Isn't defined by a 50-50 balance of power. Nowhere does it say that. Folks, international humanitarian law, and I'm being very clear about this, recognizes both international and non-international armed conflicts including asymmetric ones. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be symmetrical, as he said. More times than not, most armed conflicts that have some level of legitimacy with respect to the necessity to defend or whatever is not asymmetrical. I mean, it's not symmetrical. It's asymmetrical. By his definition, you could never call Russia, Ukraine, a legitimate war. You could never say that. Never. Russia is significantly larger than Ukraine. Russia has a significantly larger military than Ukraine ever will. By your definition, you can't call that a war. It's just ridiculous. Look, the bigger issue to be looking at has nothing to do with any kind of symmetrical function or symmetrical requirement. You must assess all of this based on the intensity of violence and organization of the armed group. That is the bigger picture. Who's organizing it? What kind of violence is being done? Are there damages? These are the things that trigger the law of armed conflict. It's unfortunate, but these people are completely denying that. Let's skip to another one. This one just bothers me so much. This is the lie that we've been addressing a lot lately, and it just keeps showing its ugly face. Let's go over this one right here. This is very interesting. Here we go.
Then there's a military.
It's
fucking great.
They might.
Sorry about the cursing, guys. As I said, there's going to be a little bit of that. I very much apologize for that. Here we go.
Armed resistance group, but I wouldn't classify them as the Wehrmacht or the Russian army or.
Did you notice that he calls them an armed resistance group? He refuses to call them terrorists. He calls them an armed resistance group. This is the same guy that if he spent 5 minutes in downtown Gaza, we all know what would happen.
Anything like this, so they don't have the infrastructure. They've been denied, and that's the thing is that Israel has denied them military infrastructure, healthcare infrastructure, education.
I can't wait to talk about this. I just cannot wait to talk about this. Here we go. Let's just let him babble.
Denied? What do you mean
all
denied?
Of these, by bombing them relentlessly, and this is all before October 7th. I'm talking about going back decades. 2014 Operation Protective Edge, worst atrocity since October 7th, since this current genocide.
Which was a response to an attack.
And no, it wasn't. It was not. It was.
He's lying. No, it wasn't. I'm going to talk about that. By the way, I'm going to talk about all of those attacks because when Protective Edge had come about, I spent some time having some real conversations about that. I remember. That was the year that my mom went to go be with the Lord. Hilarious.
Is a pretext for a larger invasion, and that same thing played out in Operation Cast Lead in 2009. I mean, it's what the Israelis acknowledge as mowing the lawn. They have to periodically go in there and mow the lawn. And what does mow the lawn mean? It means massacre a bunch of people, destroy all their buildings, and then blockade.
Okay, and then blockade. First of all, let me repeat the accusation before I deal with it. Let me just repeat the accusation. The accusation that he's making, which by the way is it's such a lie. He's either regurgitating something he's been brainwashed with, or he's just a hardcore manipulator. It's one or the other. I think he's just regurgitating things that he's been brainwashed with. This is what he says. Quote, from my memory, what I think. Let me read it. I got the transcript in front of me. Israel denied Gaza military, health, education, infrastructure by relentless bombing before October the 7th, mentioning the 2014 Protective Edge operation and the 2009 Cast Lead. I read that wrong. Cast Lead. He says they were pretexts. Israel mows the lawn, meaning massacre, destroy buildings, blockade. Okay, we're going to deal with all this nonsense. How about we just deal with that? First of all, let's talk about the context of blockade, as people would put it. Let me just deal with that first. And then we'll get into the operations or what he calls the triggers and all that stuff. After Hamas's 2007 takeover, remember that? Remember when they took over in 2007? You remember when they threw Palestinians off the roof and killed them all and so on and so forth? Israel and Egypt imposed restrictions to stop weapon smuggling and control all of these materials that they would refer to as dual use. Okay? When I say dual use, let me explain what I mean when I say that. A pipe that's used to transmit water is also a pipe they cut up to put and make a rocket to use indiscriminately to kill people. Those are dual-use materials. One could be used for good, the other could be used for something absolutely terrible. Israel and Egypt together imposed restrictions to stop weapon smuggling and to control dual-use materials. By the way, in the case of Gaza, in the case of Hamas, everything that's used to make the life of people better is a dual-use item. Starving your own people, selling food to make extra money. Think about that for a second. Guys, even humanitarian agencies that continue to criticize the impact have absolutely no clue who was the one who imposed the impact. If Israel allowed them to do that, they'd be dead. It's that simple. Let's talk about some of these so-called triggers. Operation Cast Lead. Do you know what created that? That was in September of 2008. Do you know what created that? Years of rocket fire. A broken ceasefire. Even all the critics and the enemies of Israel will acknowledge that over 10,000 rockets had preceded that. I dare you. I dare you. I dare you right now to watch the United States take one bomb, one missile, one rocket from Canada or Mexico. We would carpet bomb the living snot out of them. Over 10,000? How about protective edge? Let's talk about that for just a second. This wasn't just some, we hate these people, we're going to come against them. Protective edge followed a massive surge of rocket fire and the kidnapping and murder of 3 Israeli teens by Hamas operatives. A lot of people don't know that. And actually, even then, Israel chose not to do anything until they discovered the attack tunnels that were aimed at Israeli communities. That's not a lie. That's easily looked up. You can easily look that information up. That information is not made up at all. The receipts for that are everywhere. I can't believe I'm using that hipster term. I don't know what. But go look it up. Look up what Operation Protective Edge was. Look up the debriefs. Look up even the people that don't like Israel and what they said. By the way, can I just tell you this right now? Because this is such an important picture, all right? The term mowing the lawn is a very controversial term that's made by analysts who are describing what they would call the periodic degradations of Hamas's military capability. It's not a legal doctrine for massacre. You might be able to call the phrase cynical, but the people who use those terms argue very clearly that the goal is the attrition of a hostile, non-state actor. You could make the same argument by somebody saying, I got to clean this up. I got to go clean this place up. Does that mean you're talking about wiping out whole people groups? President of the United States said there's an immense amount of crime going on right now in Washington. We need to go clean it up. We need to clean up the filth. Is he all of a sudden a genocidal man? Folks, this is the kind of ridiculous nonsense. Let me go over another lie. This is so obvious here. And look at, it's amazing that this guy can even say this and be regarded or respected as honest. Listen to what he says here.
From having access to actually reconstruct.
8,000.
Oh,
That's how many.
sorry, I hate this. Let me quit this here. Okay, hold on. Let me rewind this a little bit.
And then blockade them from having access to actually reconstruct their
we're never going to
society.
be able to get anywhere in this conversation because earlier you said that Hamas is not a terrorist group, right?
They're an armed resistance
They're
group.
an armed resistance group, right?
Yeah,
And I
because
think
they're an
I think
occupied
that-
people.
So you said earlier.
They're an occupied people.
You said earlier that you
the IDF is a terrorist group.
You said earlier that you were in the majority. You're like, I'm in the majority. That they're losing the
On
war.
TikTok.
He's not a majority. He'll even say, well, on TikTok, I'm the majority. Okay, truth is not on this guy's side. Okay? I don't care whose politics you follow. Most people, it doesn't even matter what their politics are, will understand that Hamas is formally designated as a terrorist organization, not by the United States, but many, many other countries. The United Kingdom. It's classified by the EU sanctions framework that has to exist. They were not able to place sanctions on Hamas had they not made the declaration of them being a formal terrorist organization. They are deemed as a terrorist organization by a lot of people. United States Congress did it. The UK did it. They made that declaration in 2021. Even before what happened on October the 7th, and it's still in force. The EU Council, that means all the nations in the EU, created a very dedicated sanctions regime for those enabling Hamas. Not just Hamas directly, but anybody literally enabling Hamas. That happened several years ago. It's ridiculous. Now, they're going to make a statement that says that Israel is losing the propaganda war. And in some ways, they are. Okay? I mean, they really are. This is very important to understand this because I'm going to get into some nuancing here that's critical. But listen to what gets said here next. It's important. It is an important point.
It's 80% pro-Palestine.
Yeah, but TikTok is a communist Chinese-run fucking.
But it's just a way to run a litmus
psyop.
test of kind of seeing where people's opinions
But I mean,
are.
look, let's talk about.
I'm sorry about the language, guys. I think this may be the last time you hear that language. You may hear it one or two more times. I'm very sorry for that. I very much apologize.
Talk about that real quick, right? These online polls, you guys are living, not you guys, but some people are living in the online world and they're not in the real world.
I agree with that. There's a different world
Right?
than
It
Twitter
is a
and the real
completely
world.
different world. When you take a poll on X, how many people that are voting on it are bots? How many people are voting on it are on 50 different
But
accounts?
Israel's
voting?
not losing the propaganda war just because of bots. They're
No,
trying
no,
to blame
I
it all
think
on
that-
bots.
I
That's
think that-
very. They probably have the most bots.
Well, it's fair to say
Yeah.
too, like among Gen Z, I think Israel's support is completely collapsed on the right.
I go to these college games.
I would agree
Zach,
with that.
that's why I'm getting kind
I
of
would
more
agree with
radical.
By the way, he's going to talk about how he's getting more radical because of what college students are saying. So what college students are saying is now what's defining how your radical approach to these issues are, because college students seem to provocatively provide substantive action or understanding or awareness concerning your thinking. Like, what in the world is wrong here? Folks, TikTok is not a poll. Reputable surveys show that younger Americans, and when I say younger, I mean under 30, yes, they're more sympathetic towards Palestinians than some of the older age groups. Older meaning, and I know I'm doxing myself here, over 30, but not 80%. That's wrong. It's not even close to 80%. Not even close. I can't believe I'm going to quote these researchers. But Pew and Harvard, both their polls, the Harvard Youth polls, they're all nuanced. And I understand why they say what they're saying, because there is a huge conflict here. Many young adults disapprove of both sides, is what they're saying. They approve of both sides' leadership while sympathizing with Palestinians as people. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again, because I sympathize with Palestinians as people. I care about the Palestinian people. But at the same time, they're recognizing, and they are, almost all of them are saying they recognize, that Israel has valid reasons to fight Hamas. And many of them are beginning to realize that they have more of a valid reason to fight Hamas than Hamas might find to fight Israel. It's crazy. The Pew Research poll, the one that was in February through March conducted, if 2024 actually says that people under 30 favor Palestinians more than Israelis, not understanding fully what's going on. The overall public had a more mixed view concerning it because of the nuancing. But not even close to 80%. By the way, can I just point this out? This is really, really important. And I know that this guy isn't going to like this, Stein. He's not going to like this. But I'm going to just make myself very, very clear. You understand that this is absolutely a communistic Marxist tool. You remember when everybody says, or when people say, everybody knows this. Everybody knows that Epstein was ran by Israel. No, everybody doesn't know it. But you're saying that because it's functional manipulation of your argument prior to you making it. It's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. I just want you to hear how deeply despising these people are. Like, I just want you to understand something. Because, like, this is so terrible. Okay? Let me play this for you. This one bothers me probably more than a lot of them because now they're targeting people like us in many ways. Listen to this.
I feel like there is a time, like they have a limited amount of time to make these.
Well, they just did the red heifer, and you saw Adam King talk about this. Now they're trying to build the third temple. So, I mean, obviously they have
bring that up again.
They have some big plans. But real quick now,
Okay, they have big plans. Look at the red heifer. I don't even want to get into that whole thing. First of all, the temple that's going to get rebuilt. Okay? That's biblical. It's going to happen. Whether or not he wants to admit it, it's going to happen. I don't even... Maybe it's better for me to just be quiet because I'm just going to lose my mind on this one. The last thing he does, and I don't even want to go over it because I just think it's kind of ridiculous, but the last thing he's going to do is he is going to talk about Bibi Netanyahu's cyber directorate, who was actually arrested in Nevada on some kind of an undercover child predator sting. He posted $10,000 bail. He returned to Israel, then missed a Nevada arraignment that was ordered to appear by Zoom. That happened. The U.S. State Department made it very clear. They denied any role in his release. Is he a bad guy? Yeah, it sounds like he's a terrible guy. Terrible guy. But this guy goes on to say, there's a blackout. Nobody recovered it. Nobody reported it. That's what he says. As a matter of fact, let me go to the last part where he makes this claim. Because I want this to speak to his credibility. Because the man has zero credibility, and I want you guys to understand why the credibility of this is broken. Watch this. Listen.
Conditions as everyone else in that sting.
That is
true. They didn't take anyone's passport. They didn't restrict anyone's travel, and that's common for that area. Like, that's common for that.
Listen, I'm familiar with bonds. You got a $10,000 bond. He is technically allowed to leave if the judge didn't give him a restriction, which that was the case. But
here's when you'll hear me going like full send on agreement with all these other people. If he does not come back for his trial, and Israel does not extradite him, then you'll hear me make an argument that that's absolutely fucking bullshit. You can't do that.
I'm so sorry about the language, you guys. I'm sorry. I thought that was it. We're going to end this here real quick.
Back here now, or we'll have a problem with Israel.
Thanks for watching this clip from...
Okay. So earlier, the claim was made, and I thought it was at the end here. I'm sorry about the language. But the claim was basically made that nobody reported it. That's what they say. The quote here was that nobody reported it. Well, guess what? I looked it up. I went to go see who reported it. Okay? Reuters reported it. The Guardian reported it. The Jerusalem Post reported it. Mediaite reported it. Newsweek reported it. Several others. This wasn't a blackout. This wasn't some conspiracy. Guys, my whole point behind this is you're being lied to. That's what this is all about. Okay? Everlasting means everlasting. God said it. We understand that a war is not determined by some 50-50 equal attack type of thing. The lies about the hospitals, the churches, the lies about everything from the different incursions that took place, they're all ridiculous. Every last one of them. Every last one of them. It's ridiculous. Here's a passage that I haven't read. I read it all the time, but I'm going to read it right now. Behold, this is Zechariah chapter 12, verse 2. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the world be gathered against it. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. And I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace of supplications, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him. Notice this, as one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him, as one that is in bitterness of his firstborn. God will bring Israel back into the fold. And what are we told to do? We're told to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We're told to love God's people. Super, super important that we recognize this. Okay, that was exhausting. We ran out of time. I was kind of hoping that maybe I'd be able to go over a couple of other things, but I think this was necessary. I do this oftentimes when I do these shows alone. I get carried away a little bit, and I'm sorry for that. But what I will do is I will do what I promised, and I will let me see here. I will read the super chats and the super stickers to you guys because you are a blessing. And let me see if I can find them here. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, boy, there are a lot of them. My goodness. Okay. I've got to refresh this. That's why that didn't come up. Okay, hold on a second. These are coming to you right now. All right. Let me read these to you. Brad. Oh, I love you, Brad. Brad says, an update for your rapture is September 23rd video. Dean is looking for astrological oddities. Michael is taking Bible passages out of context, and I am doing some math. We should have this ready by week's end. Brad is being funny here because Brad is one of our researchers. So and he named all the other ones that do it for us, Michael Digman and Dean. That's hilarious. Yes, Brother James, Michael is much better at math than I, but I have to say math had mistakes when you when you do the video saying what your date was off. Oh, I love this. I love this. Yeah, I'm going to have to explain why we told them. That's what they're all doing right now. He says, I want to clarify, Brother James and Brother David would never do a rapture date video. They teach what the Bible says about an intermittent or about an imminent rapture. That's one of many reasons they have my love and support. Well, we love you too, bro. And you're in the same category. So we love you. Let me see here. Diane Graham, 6458. Thank you. Sherry Francis, 4201. Thank you so much. Go ahead and make your day or make our day Scooby-Doo. Thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you for your support. Michelle Yvonne, 59. Thank you so much. GWC, my goodness, let me read this. Very generous of you. Ephesians 3, 1 through 2. For this reason, I, Paul, the prisoner of Christ Jesus, for you Gentiles, if indeed you have heard of the dispensation of grace of God, which was given me for you. Thank you so much. Whiskey Tango Foxtrot 7415. Thank you so much. Rapture Ready. I have no words. I have no words. That is an insanely generous, very, very generous gift. Thank you. Busted Beak 76, Pastor, what is Monkey referring to when he talks about the Book of Jubilee and refers to it in his video? Pastor, what is Monkey referencing to when he talks about the Book of Jubilee? I will tell you what, I'm going to separate this conversation from being about Monkey, and what I'll do is I'll address some of those most commonly quoted things that are being said right now. There's a lot of statements being made about things like that. We'll have to address that on another day. It's a big one. All right. And then Nikki Presley NC, it says the stupid coming out of their mouths makes my blood boil. Yes, it does, and it's easy. Tweeter Trash, you say, if you recognize that the Holy Bible has an Old and New Testament, congratulations, you're a dispensationalist. I love it. P.S. You're on fire. What a great statement. Oh, you guys are so awesome. Listen, we are out of time. We have no questions, so we're going to end it right now. We've got to go. You guys are so amazing. Thank you for all that you've done. Thank you for continuing to support us. You guys are such a blessing. I will say this. It has been a pretty discouraging morning, but to see 15,000 people come out and watch. We had as many as, I want to say, like something like 1,500 simultaneous viewers today. I think that's God's way of just saying, you know what? I'm in control. I love it. Thank you for that. You guys are amazing. You guys mean so much to me. And I have no words other than thank you. You mean the world. I love you guys. God bless you. And keep fighting the good fight.